Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. First story. This story was shared by you/King Delta Theridium 2. I saw the Wendigo when I was 12. I was about 12 years old when I saw a creature I never expected to be biologically possible. Before I start recalling this horrifying memory, I have to explain what I think I saw, by telling a description of something really similar to it. The Wendigo is a creature from Native American folklore, usually resembling either a human with pointed teeth and dried blood covering its body or a humanoid animal-like spirit with a deer skull-like head. It feeds on humans, due to it being a cannibal spirit. In 1659, there were reports of a humanoid creature, with a skull-like head, killing some of the people who originally founded America in the city of what is now New York. It eventually left, and what remained was an absolute bloodbath. The town I live in refuses to talk about this occurrence, and most have forgotten about it, but not me. Anyway, I'll get on with the story. I was walking home with my parents after a long day at the zoo. It was midwinter, so there was heavy snow all over the ground. I saw large footprints in the snow, shaped like those of a large bird. The only difference was, the left toe was lifted off of the ground. I pointed this out to my parents, but they said it was probably just someone in a dinosaur costume having a prank. A snowstorm broke out 20 minutes after we set out, and I said to my parents, "We should be moving. This could be dangerous." My parents agreed, and we took shelter in a subway. My dad eventually went out to see if it was safe. We heard a low, reptilian growl, then the sound of bones snapping. We ran further down the subway, got into the train and jumped out at the next station, which was very near our house. We shut the door, locked it, and I went straight into my bedroom. I shut the door, and just in case I closed the blinds and barricaded the door. Only something supernaturally strong could push that, right? I was terribly wrong when I thought that. I heard the front door smashing open, and my mother screaming. Whatever just attacked my mom pushed my door open with ease. I then realized I had made a stupid mistake. I had only used light objects to barricade the door. The creature in front of me had armor on its head resembling a deer skull, with a crack on its snout. Its yellow eyes with slit pupils stared at me, and I stared back. Its fur was stained with blood, and I saw it holding an arm I recognized as my own father's. The creature's gray figure began to move towards me. Without thinking, I grabbed a box and threw it at the creature. It fell backwards, and I realized I had the upper hand. I took the curtain rail off the wall and charged at the creature. I kicked a box onto its head, disorientating it temporarily. When it regained full control of its body, I had already thrust the rail into its underbelly. The creature growled in anger, but eventually went into what appeared to be a permanent state of unconsciousness. I ran downstairs to check my mom. I was relieved when she turned out to be okay. We both went upstairs to check the creature, but it had vanished. So, that's the story. I'm gonna relax now, and try and forget that incident. Second story. This story was shared by you/Nick 2020. Wendigo. I never thought it would be the last time I saw my little sister. It started out as such a typical Friday afternoon, the bell rung, and we had the whole weekend to look forward to. We lived in a small town in Michigan. It was one of those towns where everyone knew everyone, one of those towns where you basically felt safe anywhere you went. We lived in a small split-level house, my little sister and I shared a bedroom, and my parents were directly across the hall from us. Our house backed onto a deep, vast forest, and through the middle of the forest was a river. The woods always provided a sort of natural playground for the local kids, building tree forts, playing hide and go seek, and swimming the more shallow parts of the river. My little sister and I felt especially lucky. The woods were essentially my backyard, and we really felt like they were ours. Our parents were fine with us playing in the woods. They just had one rule: don't cross to the other side of the river. The woods on our side of the river were quite well traveled by all the locals. By age 7 you knew them like the back of your hand. The other side of the river, however, was much less traveled. It was our town's myth, kind of our own scary claim to fame. The Mi'kmaq tribe had largely settled the area around our town, so there were a lot of stories based on Native American culture. Everyone's favorite story was about the Wendigo. A Wendigo is a Native American legend, supposedly a half-man half-beast type creature. The rumor is that during a harsh Michigan winter, a member of the Mi'kmaq tribe and his hunting partner got caught during a blizzard. The tribe member's partner died, and with no food, the tribe member was forced to eat him. Native Americans believe that Wendigos are born when a member of their tribe is forced to resort to cannibalism due to harsh conditions, such as weather, or a famine. And so, legend was born, and people began to believe that a Wendigo hunted for more flesh in our woods. Everyone from here has a story, that they would be having a campfire in the woods, and all of a sudden a deep resonating roar would sound out through the forest. The belief around here was that the Wendigo would not hunt for you, so long as you stayed on our side of the river. The rest of the woods beyond the river belonged to him. As per usual Friday ritual, my friends and I filled our backpacks with our swim trunks, snacks, soda, and other trinkets to spend the rest of the day playing in the woods. As we were leaving, my little sister came running out of the house. I was 13, and she was 9. She was begging me to come spend a day in the woods with my friends and I. Normally, I would say no, but it was such a beautiful day, and she really was not much of a hassle to have along, so I said yes. There were 4 of us, including my little sister and I. It was 3 in the afternoon, at the beginning of June, so we knew we would have daylight for quite a while. Off we went into the woods, taking the same trail that we took every time. The trail led us straight to the river, where we would set up a little camp, and spend the rest of the day playing, and swimming. A few hours rolled by, and we were pretty tired. There was not much left to do, so I suggested that we pack up, and head home. Now, 13 can be quite a rebellious age, the age where you start to disobey your parents, maybe act out in school here and there, try a cigarette, you know, pretty typical teenage behavior. "Let's cross to the other side of the river," one of my friends exclaimed. In my head, I knew this was a terrible idea. Growing up here, you barely have any rules to follow. Not going to the other side of the river was an explicit one, however. "Yeah. I've always wanted to do that," my other friend said in agreement. In my head I knew this was a bad idea, but I also did not want to seem like a chicken in front of my friends. "Well. Okay," I said cautiously. My little sister looked at me, her big blue eyes were full of fear. I reassured her, telling her that nothing bad would happen. And so, we began to walk to the point in the river where it was shallow enough to walk across. We arrived, and I will be honest, the other side of the river looked like an entirely different world. It was darker, it honestly just had this entire unfriendly vibe to it. I brushed it off that it was all in my head. It was about 7:30 p.m., and the sun was beginning to set in the sky, though we still had plenty of daylight. We walked across the river. It was about ankle deep at this point, and the water was frigid here, a lot colder than it was where we were swimming. I put my foot down on the other side of the river. For the first time in my entire life, I had done what so many people who grew up here feared to do. Just standing there felt uneasy. It really felt like we did not belong there, but at the same time there was that feeling of adrenaline pumping through my body, and it carried me as we began walking deeper into the woods. My little sister was attached to my hip. I felt bad. She truly had no interest in being here, but also wanted to appear brave in front of my friends. As we got deeper into the woods, the feeling of dread increased. The weird part is, it was not what I could hear. It's what I could not hear. There was not a sound. Not a cricket, not a bird, not even the river. It was silent, deadly silent. The trees seemed so much thicker in this part of the woods, not as much sunlight came through, so it was definitely darker, not just my imagination. Crack we heard in the distance. Everyone gasped. I cannot reiterate enough that it was silent. There was not a single noise coming from anywhere, but then to hear that distinct crack, it made my heart skip a beat. Probably just a deer, there's tons of them in the woods. One of my friends stated. At this point, I wanted to turn back, but for some reason we just kept going. The stories were echoing through my head, about the Wendigo, about how foolish people over the years had dared to cross over to this side of the river, and how they were never seen again. As we continued to explore the uncharted part of the woods, another crack this time came from behind us. That one really startled everyone. We had all decided that it was time to head back. It was really starting to get dark. There was just one problem. This side of the woods was unfamiliar to us, and we were lost. My little sister began to cry upon realizing this, and while I was doing my best to settle her down, she was really scared, and I have to admit that I was too. The minimal light that was previously coming down from between the thick trees was now beginning to fade as the sun began to set. The darkness was becoming even darker, and we had not even thought to bring flashlights. The thought of Wendigo ran through my head time and time again, each time sending a sickening chill down my spine. We tried everything we could to find our way back to the shallow spot of the river, but it was to no avail. We could not even find the river to begin with. Crack we heard again from behind us. Then a low rumble, a rumble that resonated through the trees. Whoosh! A gust of wind hit us from the side, knocking me back, and knocking my little sister over. The rumble got louder, growing into more of a roar. "It's a bear!" screamed one of my friends. Whoosh! Another gust of wind hit us, this time from behind. Crack! Whoosh! This time it hit us in the front, knocking all of us over. "Run!" I bellowed, and we all ran, leaving our backpacks behind. I had my little sister's hand in mine, essentially dragging her through the dirt and leaves on the ground of the forest. I could definitely hear something running. Fast footsteps. They would be behind us, then beside us, then gone. "It's the river!" screamed one of my friends. We all stopped as we approached the river's edge. It was too dark to tell if it was shallow or deep at this point. The roar returned, this time coming from behind us, and it was close. "We have to jump in," I said. "No!" my two friends and my little sister screamed simultaneously. Fast footsteps approached, a low growl, and multiple cracks as the predator approached us. Now! I screamed, and in we jumped. The last thing I heard before my head sunk under the water was a roar. Inhuman, and nothing like an animal could produce. I knew what had just chased us, and I know how good of a hunter it is. My question to myself was, why, and how are we still alive? The water was pitch black, and it was deep. We were all strong swimmers, and managed to find our way to the other side of the river, our side of the river. Even in the dark, we were able to navigate this side of the river, and find our way back to the trail that led to my house. The whole walk back all I could think about how was if Wendigo wanted us dead, we would be dead. Every legend about it speaks about how it is the best hunter, and how once it tracks you, you are dead. We arrived back at my house to some very angry parents, scolding us. We all explained how we had just lost track of time, having too much fun playing in the woods. They bought all of our explanations. No way were we going to mention the fact that we went exactly where we had been told not to go our entire lives. I prepared myself for bed, and went to lie down in my bed. It was hot this time of year, so my window was open. It was letting in a gentle breeze that felt quite nice, so I decided to just leave it open. As I lie there, I hear the sound of the quick footsteps again, accompanied by the low rumbling. My palms began to sweat, my heart dropped into my stomach. Had Wendigo tracked us back to our house? As slowly as possible, I turned the lever and closed my window, doing my best not to make a sound. My little sister was asleep on the bed parallel to mine, and I did not want her to hear any of this. I shut the window, and flipped the latch to lock it. My parents were asleep, my little sister was asleep, I was the only one awake for this. I lay under my covers, noticing every little sound my old house made. And then I heard it, the kitchen door was opening. It makes a distinct squeak when it opens. I began to shake. Wendigo had come. I could hear it moving about our basement, knocking a glass over, opening cupboards. The sound of fast footsteps below me. The fast footsteps became louder as Wendigo made its way up our staircase, and to my bedroom door. The knob turned, and Wendigo was inside my bedroom. I shook violently, my hands clammy, my stomach sick. I hid under my covers as I listened to the low rumble grow louder and louder with each footstep it took in my room. And then whoosh, the same sound it had made as it hunted us in the woods. The rumbling had stopped, and the fast footsteps were gone. Wendigo too was gone as I emerged from under my covers. But where did it go? The sun shined brightly into my room the next morning, and I hopped out of bed. I went downstairs to find my parents sitting in the kitchen, my dad reading the newspaper and drinking coffee, my mom frying bacon for breakfast. "Morning, champ, you must have slept well after your big day yesterday," my dad said. He was right, it was 11 a.m., and I rarely sleep past 9:30. "The same for your sister," my mom said. "Why don't you go wake her up, champ?" my dad said. I immediately ran upstairs to our room, and to this day, it is still the most horrific sight that I have ever laid eyes upon. My little sister's bed was empty. "Mom. Dad. Come quick," I cried out. They both ran upstairs. "Oh my God. Where is she?" my mom said. She was already beginning to cry. We looked everywhere, she was not in the house. My parents looked outside, and within an hour, a search party had formed. They searched the woods top to bottom, but she was nowhere to be found. My parents believed that she had wandered off to the woods in the morning, fell in the lake, and drowned. But I knew why they could not find her. I knew why they would never find her. They were looking in the wrong side of the woods. Third story. This story was shared by you/Foxiana123. A Wendigo is watching me. Recently, a few months ago, I moved into a new house in the mountains. It's almost always cold and I'm surrounded by woods, but I like it as it's easier to do my job in isolation, with little distractions. I sell paintings and am paid a small monthly check to write poems for a magazine that is both online and physical. The new surroundings have given me all sorts of inspiration both for writing and painting. The strange occurrences started about a week into me living here. More and more frequently I'd find dead animals nearby. Not really gored or anything. Just dead. Rabbits, birds, and the occasional fox. It freaked me out, but I just assumed a predator of sorts was showing off because they felt threatened by me. I decided to always carry around a gun and a taser, just to be safe. I also decided to call an expert of the mountains and asked him to visit. When he came he seemed worried. Now this man was a fairly old Native American who had lived on these mountains for about his whole life, so this concerned me, knowing he knew just about everything on this mountain. He sat me down and told me a tale of a dark creature, born of hunger and cold, a Wendigo. I was skeptical. This was a creature of fiction, at least, I thought it was. He left with a stern warning to never stray too far from home without good reason, and never follow the voices of the forest, as it may be a Wendigo luring me to their feeding grounds. I spent the next few days watching the woods closely. Maybe if I got a glimpse of whatever was in the woods my mind could be put at ease. At first I saw nothing, then I saw swift movement among the underbrush and trees. It wasn't until around the fifth day of watching, I saw something clearly, something standing upright, with deer-like legs, staring at me with pale eyes. I quickly went inside, suddenly feeling chilled to the bone. It took a bit and some self-pumping before I could go back outside to do my painting and wood watching. I found myself putting what I could see of the creature in my paintings, but I could never catch the coldness of its eyes quite right. It fascinated and terrified me greatly, but I couldn't stop. The creature got braver, showing a bit more as time passed. I could now confirm it had a large set of antlers and its front limbs were not hooves like its back legs but claws. It watched me almost as curiously as I watched it. I knew then that it was likely a Wendigo, one that decided to watch me, although I didn't dare attempt to approach it, knowing its curious nature might be as deceiving as a wolf's smile. Although I never verbally called it this name, I subconsciously named it Branch. It seemed suiting. He started, or I think it was him, pushing over items on my porch, like empty paint pots and small decorations, going back to the tree line by the time I come outside. It didn't really bother me as nothing got damaged, kind of reminded me of a cat actually. I began speaking to it, not expecting responses. While I painted I would just ramble out loud, knowing he was just at the trees. I don't know if he listened, but I think he did, as his ears would face towards me the whole time, those long slightly disproportionate ears. One day he appeared with scars, a few still bleeding. This concerned me but I couldn't get close to him. He was an injured animal and would even more likely attack me if I got close. After a few days they healed to pale marks on his skin. This happened a few times but I learned to ignore it. This routine went on for a good while. I watched him, he watched me, but we kept our distance, but that changed yesterday. He approached me, and I didn't even notice till I saw his shadow. I looked up and saw shaggy black fur that smelled like rotting meat. I could see his cold empty eyes so clearly now, they were genuinely curious, but hungry. I didn't move, I froze up, I didn't even shiver. After what seemed like an eternity, he turned and headed towards the trees. I didn't dare move until he disappeared among the trees. I went inside and called the man that warned me of them. He agreed to come pick me up when we could. I'm waiting for the man to get here. Branch is staring at me through the window. Excuse me for the wait, I couldn't find much time to write after I posted. A few hours after the man pulled in the front, which unlucky for me, was where Branch was. I got the meat chop I had pulled out earlier and stepped outside. Branch was staring through the window. When he turned to look at me I made sure to look at his chest fur rather than his eyes, soulless cold eyes. I threw the meat, he ignored it, didn't even twitch. I started to slowly move towards the man's truck, Branch's eyes tracking me. As I moved off the porch he started to follow me, his hooves making heavy footfall on the wood. His eyes never left me as I slowly made my way to the car. He slowly followed, staying 3 feet away, no more no less. When I finally made it in he was still staring, with those cold empty eyes. The man slowly pulled out and started down the long mountain trail. He started muttering about how I shouldn't have let it get this far as well as other colorful words and terms. Right now I'm at his cottage at the base of the mountain. I'm still shaken and I don't know if I want to risk going back. His wife is lovely and treats me well, as far as guests go, but I know I'll have to leave soon. The man explained that the Wendigo was one well known on the mountain, known for only attacking young females, always leaving the head intact. Now this is only semi-relevant, as I am a man. But he can't explain why he's taken a sudden interest in me. Maybe he's contemplating eating me. In a few hours he's taking me back. He's given me food, a gun, several rounds, and a blowtorch. I got home an hour ago. Branch wasn't there, but my porch looked like a tornado passed, and I think there's shit by the doorstep. I quickly went inside and locked the doors, the windows. I don't think he knows I'm back yet, and I don't want him to know. It's been a few hours and no sign of him. I don't want to go outside to tidy up my porch, I'm too scared to. It's hard to swallow the sandwich I made because of the tension I'm feeling, but I have to eat. I think I'm gonna take a nap after I finish it. He's here, he's staring into the windows and making distorted huffs and brays, occasionally stamping his hooves on the porch. He can't see me right now 'cause I'm behind the couch. He sounds angry. He started banging his antlers on the glass. He's trying to fucking break it. It's starting to crack. The glass shattered. My heart is pounding. My ears are ringing. I can smell the rotten meat he reeks of. He crawled in through the window. I think he can smell me. He started knocking over random things, but I'm frozen. I can't bring myself to peek. I might try to make a run for it, or I'll have to wait it out. He just went down the hall. I'm gonna go out the front and run. I don't know how far I ran. But the sun went down by the time I stopped and the temp is definitely below freezing. Luckily, I was already wearing a heavy coat, and I found a small overhang. Will rest, hopefully he doesn't find me. I woke up, but it's still dark out. It's only 12, I slept 3 hours. I'm shivering like crazy, but the overhang helps a little, blocking the wind. The forest seems still, nothing is stirring, not even the owls are hooting. I'm gonna go back to sleep, hopefully it's light out when I wake up this time. I woke up an hour or so ago and started walking towards the base of the mountain. My limbs feel numb, but the movement has helped. The forest is still eerily quiet, and I keep finding blood puddles and tufts of fur. I think Branch threw a massive tantrum. I need to find a house with people in it, safety in numbers. I didn't bring the gun, I know, I'm stupid, but I just wanted away from him. I started running again. I heard what sounded like hooves and I swear I smelled rotting flesh again. If he catches me on his turf, I'm honestly fair game to kill, even if I'm not his preferred food. I found a field of corpses, deer, bears, rabbits, wolves, birds. Dead animals everywhere. I quickly went around it, holding my breath, trying not to puke. I guess that's why the forest was so quiet. He killed all the animals in a fit, like a violent child throwing a tantrum, a child that could easily rip out my throat and cave in my ribcage and skull. I'm seriously hoping he isn't following me. I can see houses. I think I found one of those retreats for monks or whatever who take vows of silence. I'm gonna see if they can help me. So, good news, they happily let me into a living area where I could warm up and provided food and a warm drink. I think it's just milk. They contacted someone and wrote me a note saying that someone would be coming for me to take me off the mountain. A few decided to be curious, so I explained what happened. A few wrote me off, but others gave me scared, shocked looks. They've taken me to bedroom and communicated that I can sleep until the person coming to get me actually gets here. When he does, I'm not going back. My things can stay there, as can Branch. I'll find somewhere else to live, like an apartment, in a city, with people. I was able to sleep a few hours before the guy came. I told him to just take me to the nearest town. I'm outside a motel right now, slowly making calls and arrangements. I'm never going back to that place, with that thing. Ever. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/Saint_Circa. I know why so many people go missing from national parks. I don't know why I went to Mount Rainier. I mean, I know what I went to Mount Rainier for, but to this day I don't really know why I felt so compelled to go. I've always been obsessively curious. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I get these fascinations for things out of seemingly nowhere, and once that fascination lodges itself in my head, it quickly starts to take over every waking aspect of my life, it seems. Thinking about it turns into reading about it. Reading about it turns into researching it as thoroughly as possible. Research leads to investigation, and the rabbit hole of my obsessions just goes and goes, and then as suddenly as this obsession starts, it's gone. Complete and total disinterest, just like that. Ever since I was a kid it's been this way. I kind of compare it to an itch. And ultimately the only way to really stop an itch is to scratch it. Right? I remember laying on my couch on a rainy off day from work and scrolling through YouTube while I waited for the Domino's guy to drop off some buffalo wings when a strange title I'd never heard of came up and caught my eye. Missing 411, Strange and Unexplained Disappearances in America's National Parks. As soon as I clicked on that video, I knew I'd found my newest obsession. The Dyatlov Pass incident I had been researching for months now was gone and out the window. Hindsight's always 20/20ths, as the saying goes. I had no idea that I was about to set an unchangeable course that led me to the horrifying reality I was soon to discover. 3 weeks and probably 100 videos, a handful of ordered books, and an endless scrolling through every forum and internet thread I could get my hands on, and I was still just as enamored with these missing 411s as I'd been when I first clicked on that initial YouTube video. I'd be genuinely surprised if there were a lot of people reading this who didn't know about David Paulides, the missing 411s, and all of confounding mysteriousness that surrounded these matters, but for those who might be out of the loop, I'll do my best to sum it up in few little bullet points for you. Cliff notes or whatever. There have been a disturbingly large number of unexplained disappearances in America's national parks, and by large number I mean 2,000. That's more than everyone in the North Tower on September 11th. 2,000 people just vanishing in the woods with no explanation whatsoever. 2. A lot of these people are never seen/heard from again. That in its own right is insane given the technologies that we have, and the massive searches that are sometimes carried out for these people, but what's even weirder is that the people that are eventually found leave us more questions than answers. Kids go missing and are found miles and miles away from the initial search zone. Way further than even top survival experts are able to walk. People's bodies turn up in super obvious areas that have been searched multiple times by search and rescue teams. Search dogs will have a good obvious trail on the missing person and then just lose it. Sometimes all they find are the person's shoes, sometimes they find the person with no shoes at all, sometimes the bodies look like they've fallen from a great height despite there being no high ground to fall off of, etc. 3. The number of times military units have been deployed to go and search for missing people is eyebrow-raising to say the least. The military is very effective, but they're not search and rescue. They're trained to seek and destroy, not really search and save. 4. The National Park Service gets very, very sketchy when it comes to any kind of further inquiry. This has led a lot of people to believe that they're covering something up. Now, me being the obsessive person that I am, immediately started trying to sleuth around for some kind of conclusion. What was the overall theory? What did people think was going on here? I guess because the speculation can go on forever. The theories go on forever too. Everything from rich megalomaniacs on hunting trips, aliens, Wendigos and skinwalkers, Bigfoot abductions, parallel universes. The list is truly endless. So many different theories, and as wild as some of them might sound at first. It's beyond eerie how quickly they begin to sound more than rational, and even possible with just a little bit of explanation. But as I poured through the seemingly endless accounts and rumors, there was one theory that hit a stronger chord with me than the rest. Feral people. In a nutshell, the theory is that during the Great Depression, maybe even earlier, people took off with their families deep into these wilderness regions to live off the land and get away from the crippling poverty of the cities and towns during that time. Generations of incest and isolation resulted in their ancestors being what we would consider feral, completely hostile, incapable of reasoning that we can comprehend, with a multi-generational knowledge of the land they lived in and how to survive it. Paired with a relatively untouched, government-protected, after all, access to a virtually endless number of resources. Other humans, if the opportunity presented itself, could not only be a decent food opportunity, but they were also food opportunity with extremely valuable tools just ripe for taking. Like cereal with a fucking prize in the box. Can you imagine how valuable a water bottle would be to a caveman? How wildly priceless a fishing pole would look. The National Park Service knows about these feral people, but they also know it'd be a huge risk to go traipsing in the wilderness looking for bloodthirsty cannibals that are more competent and dangerous than even the most apex predators they live with. They also provide an extremely valuable insight for scientists to study all sorts of things about human nature, but from time to time they get a little too close, or they get too bold and give their locations away. The military gets called in to dispose of these tribes in a discreet and efficient manner before more people disappear, and as a result more people take to the woods to find their missing people. For whatever reason this theory made perfect sense to me. Well, almost perfect sense. It checked almost all the boxes. Children and elderly people go missing because they're the easiest to overpower. Hikers who are by themselves go missing because they're by themselves and can be ambushed quicker than a group of hikers could. Hunters go missing because they're far off the beaten path, and they have weapons that are worth the risk. It even explains why bow hunters tend to go missing more than gun hunters. Bows are easier to figure out, and lower maintenance. We already know people go missing without a trace and are never found again. Would it be so wild to say in the same breath that people are never found in the first place for the same reasons? Even most of your Bigfoot sightings in these national parks could be explained with the feral people theory. Imagine what you would look like if you had never had a haircut, if you'd never taken a shower, or clipped your nails, or combed your hair or shaved your beard. Throw a Habsburg jaw or a heavy brow in the mix from years of intrafamilial breeding and you're pretty much the perfect definition of a Sasquatch at that point. But for all the information and cross-examinations that I would read about to seemingly prove this theory, there were admittedly a few glaring loopholes that with a bit more thought would very quickly start to pull the whole idea apart. Humans are truly a scourge on this planet. Anywhere we go we leave a mess, we make smoke from fires, we burn things down accidentally, we cut down trees and leave bones lying all over the place. The very steps we take kill the forest floor, leaving huge patches of dirt wherever we stay for more than a few days. We are hands down the easiest animal to find. Every human that's ever walked the earth inherently believes that the earth is theirs. I guess that manifests even in the most unconscious of ways. Not to mention the scientific probabilities, infertility that comes with incest, crippling genetic mutations, etc. For all the positive evidence, I'll be the first to admit there were some serious holes in the theory. So around and around I went with this concept. 4 months. Ruling it in and ruling it out. Until one day I was given what I can only describe as a divine revelation. Like the conspiracy gods took pity on my slow decay into insanity and threw me a nice big bone to chew on, and this one actually had some meat on it. I had fallen asleep on the couch amidst another bout of determined research. YouTube was once again in the background. When I woke up from my nap I went for the remote when the narrator of the video caught my attention. Missing 411s had rabbit holed into unexplained mysteries in general, and unexplained mysteries had rabbit holed into crazy discoveries made by scientists and historians. The narrator was talking about this skull that had been found. The picture of it was posted up for the viewer to see while he talked about it. It was an old weathered-looking skull that had puncture holes in the cranium part. Because of these holes scientists thought for a long time that this child had been the victim of a human sacrifice, but through a series of discoveries it was made apparent that this child in actuality had been picked clean off the ground by a crowned eagle. Suddenly it hit me. I sprang out of my seat like a madman as all the pieces began to fall together like an Rubik's cube that was all but solving itself. Giant fucking eagles. I know. It sounds ridiculous. On the surface more ridiculous than any other theory brought forward, but like my dad always said, the difference between batshit and guano is the stuff that's inside it, and this was no different. I'm not going to get into every painful detail here, but I do have to point out a few just to show you where I'm coming from here. Eagles eat take out. They swoop in, snatch and kill their food, fly it back, and eat in the nest. This explains why people go missing and are never found again. They're being looked for somewhere on the forest floor, when they've actually been carried up a mountain and dropped in a nest somewhere. This also explains why the people who are found are way further out than they by all rights should be, and why so many seem to have fallen from a great height. The eagle takes someone who's a little too heavy, takes someone who doesn't die right away and squirms a bit too much, gets spooked or startled and needs to fly faster, and they drop their meal. 2. Eagles are ambush predators. They hang out on a perch, and as soon as they see a tasty snack, they swoop and pin it down, kill it, then swoop back with their newly acquired meal to wherever it is they nest at. This explains why so many lone hikers go missing off a trail. Just like a hunter would babysit a game trail for deer, an eagle babysits a footpath for humans, and speaking of deer. 3. An eagle large enough to swoop up with a human would more than likely have a reliable food source of deer, and there are a crap ton of deer. In Yellowstone alone there are over 2,000 mule deer running around, and that's just mule deer, and this is the very reason why hunters go missing. If you're out hunting a deer, then chances are you're wearing scents, and making deer calls. In other words, you are actively trying to convince deer that you are in fact, also a deer, but the same artificial smells and bleats that would attract a nice big 10-point would just as easily be a free food sign for a large bird of prey. 4. This also explains why so many times only aspects of the missing person have been found. Shoes, backpacks, cameras, hiking sticks, bows, etc. Eagles are smart creatures. They probably learned pretty quickly that there's a lot of stuff on these humans that aren't edible. Clothing can be torn through easily enough, but the thicker, more durable stuff gets ripped off and discarded. Like a deer's antlers. The feet are torn off by the ankles and smaller animals eat whatever is left inside. Now, I know if you're reading this, you're probably thinking one glaring thing. Come on Saint_Circa. You'd think someone would notice giant eagles flying around. But they have. That's why the National Park Service gets so shady when people try to investigate further. They are well aware that there are giant eagles living in the hundreds of miles these national parks reach out to sometimes, and considering eagles only hunt in a roughly 15 to 20 mile perimeter around their nests, they know exactly where to find them as well. America's national bird is the bald eagle. It's been that way since 1782. By 1963 there were only 400 nesting pairs of bald eagles in the entire country. Why? Because people shot them out of the sky in droves. Not for their meat, not for their valuable talons or beaks. Researchers say that these eagles were killed mainly to see them up close. That's it. Do you think for half a second there wouldn't be 1,000 hillbillies with birdshot scouring the entire countryside the second it was discovered that there were giant eagles flying around? My best guess is that the National Park Service works in tandem with wildlife conservationist groups to keep these endangered animals as secret as possible, but you can't just let giant man-eating eagles fuck each other willy-nilly and fly around eating whatever they want whenever they feel like. No one's going to go spend money to hang out at a natural park they'll be killed and eaten at. That'd be horrible for business. In comes the military. You see, it's not just the military that's sent out to find these missing people. It's one particularly small, but highly effective section of the military, and that section is the Green Berets. Green Berets have a large set of skills, but two of their main purposes are special reconnaissance and unconventional warfare. And almost all their operations fall under the category of classified. In layman's terms, they specialize in finding things and reporting information on it. And killing things in very unique and creative ways. And then of course they're not allowed to talk about any of it. Total secrecy. You think these guys get called out because Tiny Tim got turned around in the woods? Bullshit. The government can't even send a real hazmat team to Palestine, Ohio when a chemical fire radiates the entire town. No, they go out there when park rangers suspect Tiny Tim got turned into a giant eagle's lunch, and they need the best of the best to identify if that is indeed the case and take it down/dispose of it properly if it is, and keep their mouths shut about it afterwards. They get sent out when scientists speculate that the giant eagle population has grown too high and is risking compromise. The Green Berets go out and depopulate a bit. Keep the population under control, and keep their mouths shut about it afterwards. They get sent out when one dies so they can collect the body for research, and keep their mouths shut about it afterwards. I was absolutely sure of it, but even after this certainty cemented itself into everything else I knew to be true. A new dangerous itch began to invade the back of my mind. You can't just know that a house is haunted. You have to actually see the ghost, don't you? I fought it for longer than I thought possible, but within 7 months of watching that first video I found myself driving to Mount Rainier. I had to complete the experiment. I had to be sure that I was sure that I was sure. How's that song go? The old 80s one. Blinded with science. Took forever to plan the trip. I'd already been spending weeks studying things about eagles, but now I had to reorient and study how to spot eagles. When they hunted, how to watch them without spooking them, etc. But after 4 deep diving months I had my plan, and everything I needed to carry it out. I chose Mount Rainier for 2 reasons. The first being it was close, the second being that there have been an unusual number of disappearances not only on the mountain itself, but in the entirety of the national park that surrounded it. Even by national park standards. In the small hours of the morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise, I took off down the trail and began looking for the perfect spot to set up my blind. See, normal eagles hang out in big trees, or on the sides of cliffs, but my hypothesis was that a giant eagle would probably be hanging out in crevices against cliffs. When something it could eat walked into its radar, it would swoop out and ambush it. About 4 hours into my trip, I found a spot I thought was ideal. A small hilltop with trees, but not too many trees. At the bottom of the hill to my left a large cliff wall could be seen. To the right was relatively flat land with enough space in between for a large bird to fly through unhindered. And so, I waited, and waited, and waited. For 3 days I sat in that fucking blind. Watching the deer. Eating cold maize and trying my hardest not to doze off. At the beginning of day 4, however, it would all change. I was just considering leaving. When you're alone in a ramshackle tent, it doesn't take long for your mind to convince you of what an idiot you are. Giant eagles. Come on, Saint_Circa, look at all the time you've wasted. Why can't you get hooked on something productive? As a big 10-point stepped out of the brush into the area just in front of me, I watched it with a sort of boredom. Deer are cool the first time you see one, but this had to have been the 100th deer in 3 days that I'd seen, and at the end of the day they're just horses with antlers. They mosey, they eat. They poop and leave. I guess in my boredom I didn't really notice how quiet the forest had gotten. The deer did though. It stopped mid-bite and perked its head up, locked rigidly into place with a big mess of grass hanging out of its mouth. And that's when it happened. It was so fast my mind hardly had time to process it. One moment the deer was standing there, and the next it was pinned to the ground. I sat there wide-eyed and in shock from the hidden barrier of my blind. Standing over this thing was the largest animal I had ever seen. Its huge wingspan seemed to stretch endlessly. It had to have been 40 feet from end to end. The forest floor was shaded almost completely as its outstretched wings blotted the sun from the sky. Even without the wings it was almost too large to comprehend. At least 8 feet off the ground on its two taloned legs. Its dinosaur-like eyes gazing emptily into its prey like huge orbs of golden fire. The poor animal let out one bleated scream before the eagle's large beak tore into its neck, sending streams of blood and tissue across the forest floor like something out of a slasher movie. I could hear bones crunching violently even from the distance I was at. Suddenly I realized I had to take a photo. No one would believe it if I didn't show them firsthand. Even then they'd have probably thought it was just a hoax. Green screens and CGI and Photoshop, all that shit. I raised the lens of my camera towards the creature with shaking hands and snapped a shot. Huge mistake. As soon as the camera made that stupid little fluttering sound, the eagle's head snapped instantly in my direction. Its lifeless eyes staring with pure instinct straight through the camouflage of my structure. It saw me. Before I could react, there was a sharp blast of wind. In less than a moment the entire blind was ripped off of its stakes and thrown into the woods around me. As I recovered and looked around, panic-stricken, I could see the horrible thing tearing into the remnants of the plastic structure some 15 or 20 feet in front of me, trying to find me inside of it. With everything I could muster I took off in the direction of my car. I've never ran so fast in my life. It took a long time to get back to my car, and the few times I stopped to try and catch my breath or dry heave I was all but sure would result in me being another missing 411 on Mount Rainier. After what felt like days of almost endless running, I made it back to my car. Exhausted and frightened for my life. As I sat in the driver's seat hyperventilating from exhaustion and weeping from fear, I couldn't wrap my mind around what I just witnessed, or how I was still here to think about it. The only thing I could think about was getting the hell as far away from Mount Rainier as possible. As I made the long drive home, and my thoughts began to somewhat return to me, I concluded that the eagle must have gotten itself trapped in the blind just long enough for me to get away. It was either that or the deer it had killed had way more meat than I did, and it was already dead. I guess it'd be pointless to chase a smaller prey. Eagles are wicked smart after all. I tried to contact several authorities afterwards, but surprise, no one believed it. You know, sir, eagles are a lot bigger than people initially think they are. Are you sure you weren't using any illegal substances? Okay, well, we'll send someone out to look at it and tell you what we find. We'll let you know if we find anything. We'll let you know. That camera is still out there in the woods with the rest of my stuff. I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to try and go back for it. Maybe someone will find it and the truth will be that much harder to dismiss. For now, I only have you guys to tell. The National Park Service is hiding something big in the mountains and forests of the United States, and if you ever go hiking in one of these remote places, make sure you are never alone. Fifth story. This story was shared by you/Northcoast10. I think I encountered a Wendigo. My wife and I have been running the rat race for years, with a family, a house in the city, 2 dogs, a cat, the stereotypical American dream. But the city took its toll, the neighborhood got worse, the crime rose, and we found ourselves looking for a way out. Our opportunity came when I was offered a new job out of state. It was a great career move, but we didn't want to move to a new city just to have the same problems again. So we started looking around and found a great mountain community about an hour and a half from the job, and a great ranch-style house with a big back porch, windows everywhere, and a lot of property. The backyard has a big grassy area, and a creek that cuts the property in half, then acres of woods beyond. It's huge. The house is more than twice the size of our house in the city, it's all updated, and has no neighbors within a mile. It's a radical change from the life we lived in the city, but best of all, it was less than half of what we were paying for our old house. The house was a foreclosure, and when we asked the listing agent about it, she simply said the old family had abandoned the property. We really didn't think anything of it. The first 3 months were uneventful, with us settling into our new life, the kids getting used to the new school and new friends, and most of all, us getting used to the big house and property. But then the weather turned cold and things started to get weird on the property. It started with noises from the back property. Things we chalked up to being in the woods, then the motion lights around the house started going off randomly. Once again we just chalked it up to being in the woods. But last night, it all changed. Last night was the most terrifying night of my life. One of the dogs was at the back door whining and scratching. I assumed he needed to go to the bathroom, so I grabbed my flashlight and walked out the back door. Instantly something felt off. The dog bolted for the back property, growling and snarling. It was a cold night, about 30 degrees, but the dog plunged straight into the creek and out the other bank, running off into the woods in the back of the property. Flashlight bouncing, I ran after him, calling his name. I got to the creek and made my way across the makeshift bridge, trying desperately to follow him. I could hear the dog still growling and barking from somewhere up ahead, and I pushed further away from the safety of the house and deeper into the woods. That's when I heard it. A shriek like I've never heard before in my life. It was a mix of a moaning wail and metal on metal. It echoed through the trees and then froze me in my tracks. My dog bounded its way back to me and cowered down behind me. I turned around and could just make out the warm glow of the house behind me, and the cold dark ahead of me. I swung my flashlight around wildly looking for the source of the noise. And that's when I heard an even more terrifying noise. Out of the cold silence, my wife's voice floated all around me. "Babe," the voice called out. I whipped back around and could just barely make out the image of my wife, safely inside our house. The voice called out again. "Babe, I'm right here," came the voice from deeper into the woods. Then came another voice, just as clear as the other. It was my dad's voice. "Come out here," it called. I swung the flashlight around again and this time caught the briefest glint of light bouncing off of eyes. The creature was in my beam of light for barely a second, but it was tall, maybe 6 feet, and ashen white. It had long spindly fingers that grasped the trunk of a pine tree, and then it was gone. I turned back and ran towards the house. I ran headlong into the icy creek and stumbled. My dog ran past me, making it back to the yard and up to the porch. I dug my hands into the freezing, muddy bank and pulled myself out, not stopping to look back. When I reached the porch, I scrambled inside. My wife ran over to me, asking what had happened. I just shook my head. I'm not certain myself what happened. I had a growing sense of dread tonight as the sun began to fall. We kept the dogs inside, and I haven't dared to look out the back. But as I sit here typing, one by one, my motion lights in the backyard keep going on. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.